Good afternoon, and welcome to Election Bites, bite-sized conversations for your lunch hour. My name is Avery Davis Roberts, and I'm Associate Director in the Carter Center's Democracy Program. And I am thrilled to welcome you to the first in a series of very short conversations that we will be having every day this week as we head into election week next week. Today, we're going to be talking about election observers and voter intimidation, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Leah Merivaki, who is a member of the Carter Center's U.S. Election Expert Study Team and an assistant professor in American politics at Mississippi State University. She's an expert in election sciences, particularly the study of voter registration reforms and their impact on equal access to voting. Leah, welcome.
Hi, nice to be here.
We're so glad
In the
that you're the
virtual
first
world.
doing
Mhm.
this first conversation with us. Um,
My pleasure.
Maybe just to kick us off, could you just tell us a little bit more about what election observation is?
Yes, absolutely. So, election observation is the process of observing, as the word says, several aspects of the election process, even before voting begins. Voting technology demonstrations, absentee and in person voting processes, as well as counting of the votes and even recounts without disrupting the election process overall and without intimidating voters. In the United States, election observers who represent parties are often called poll watchers. That's a word that we're very familiar with in this season. And they have, in many states, the ability to challenge a voter's eligibility to vote. Nonpartisan election
Mm.
observers can also participate in this. They do not represent a political party, but they can represent nonpartisan advocacy groups.
Thanks. That's a great, very quick overview of who can observe and what they do. Um, Sort of building on that, what are some of the benefits of election observation? Why do we do this?
That's a great question. Election observation is a great way for citizens and the public broadly defined to directly engage with the democratic process, to enhance transparency and protect election integrity. Observers, either partisan or nonpartisan, get involved because they want to ensure that election processes are conducted in a transparent manner, that voters are not treated unfairly, and that votes are being counted accurately. So it's a great opportunity for the public to get involved and see how elections are run and all the different intricacies involved in the voting process.
I mean, I think that's a really important point. One of the things that we've been working on, as you know, Leah, is to try and promote more transparency or more public awareness of the need for transparency in the electoral process. And so finding ways that you can engage as a citizen, I think, is a really interesting way of learning more about the election process. A lot of people, just turn up to vote and don't necessarily think about all of the many steps that have to take place for that ballot box to be there on election day for the voters. You touched on some of the different groups that observe. You talked about nonpartisan election observers. You talked about poll watchers. Could you maybe elaborate on that a little bit and speak to the difference between nonpartisan observation and poll watching?
Absolutely. So technically, both groups can be are election observers, so they fall in the same category, but they have different goals and responsibilities, respectively. So nonpartisan election observers, their job is to oversee the election process, including the conduct of poll watchers. So they're there to ensure the integrity of the process, that everything goes
Mhm.
smoothly, and that voters are not being intimidated or treated unfairly. Poll watchers have a slightly different responsibility. They do represent parties, so their main goal is to, of course, oversee the election process, but also make sure that their preferred party and candidates are not treated unfairly, and there's nothing in the process that might not be transparent and may disadvantage their party or candidate. And they have the power, and it is a power that can be used in many states to challenge a voter's eligibility. So if they have grounds to question someone's eligibility to vote, they have the capability to say so, and that can sometimes result in someone not being able to cast a vote, and that leads to a whole different process of resolution.
Mhm. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about poll watchers in the news this election season. There was a little bit in 2016, but it's definitely sort of reached a new peak with this election year. Should people be concerned about the reports and the news coverage around poll watchers and the potential role of poll watchers this year?
This is a valid concern, and we see those stories in the primaries. We see them now, and voters are concerned, and without with good reason. But voters should know that state election law regulates who can and cannot access a polling place, and that states limit the number of poll watchers, namely partisan election observers, in a polling place. They often require that the political parties get a confirmation from the state on who is to become a poll watcher, and they often place limits on how many can be in a polling place. So if anyone claims to be a poll watcher outside the polling place, that is illegal. It is called electioneering, and there are laws to prevent that from happening. And we do consider that as intimidation. So voters should be aware of who can be inside the polling place, and poll watchers can, but outside the polling place, they're not allowed to. So anyone who says, I'm a poll watcher, don't buy it. It's not true.
It's good tips. And I guess just building on that, if you're a voter and you feel intimidated or you see some of these sorts of instances that you were just mentioning, Leah, like what should you do?
That's a great question. And we have to keep saying that over and over. Voters have a constitutional right to vote, and they are protected by both federal and state law to do so without being intimidated. So, if a voter is approached by someone who claims to be a poll watcher outside a polling place, they should immediately report it to their election officials and the poll workers. Inside the polling place, if a voter feels that they're intimidated, she should alert or he should alert their election official and poll workers. They can also call the election protection hotline and report any instance of voter intimidation. So voters have rights and they have options.
Fantastic. Just this is just a very short little conversation, so we're gonna wrap it up. But maybe, Leah, could you tell us if there was like one thing that you would want people to take away from this conversation? What would it be?
Yes, thank you, Avery. So this is a note for voters because we want to give the best information for voters to have as they prepare to vote, even if they have voted already. It is important to know that just because poll watching is legal in all or most states, and poll watchers have the ability to challenge a voter's eligibility, it does not leave the voter without a choice or a voice if they feel they're being targeted. No one has the right to intervene with the election process, and no one has the right to deter someone from casting a vote. So voters, again, seeing individuals in their polling place, they might see people who they're not familiar with, and they might not be poll workers. They might have a role there, and they might be legally there following state law. But
Mm.
if voters feel that they're targeted, they're being discriminated against, they have the option, and they should report it, and they should call it out to the local official and their poll workers, and use their voice, because no one should be attempting to intimidate voters and interfere with their process of casting a vote.
Thanks, Lee. I think that's a great takeaway message. So, for more information about these issues around election observers, what constitutes intimidation, we have a great resource on the Carter Center website, and Ask the Expert with Leah about these issues. You can find that at cartercenter.org/vote, where you will also find many other resources and information that has been pulled together by the Carter Center team. We hope that you'll join us for other conversations in this series. As I said, this is just the first. We'll be here every day this week. Tomorrow's conversation will be with David Carroll, who will share his reflections on being an international observer and sort of what it would be like to be an international observer in around this election process. And that is at 1 o'clock tomorrow. So we hope to see you then for another election bite. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.